Alright, hi everyone. Welcome to a new video on the difference between client-side rendering, server-side rendering, and something called static site generation. First two things we have actually covered many times. We might not have named them this, but we have covered them many times. Static site generation is something new and interesting we will learn, but let's go point by point and recap what is client-side rendering, how is it different from server-side rendering, and then finally let's get into some SSG or what's called static site generation. Client-side rendering. The whole concept of client-side rendering came when frameworks like React came into the picture. Before that, people would just write everything in their HTML file. They would have a very long HTML file and put all of their, code in here. That's how most websites were built for years. There were some frameworks like jQuery that would make your life slightly better. But the rendering bit, the writing of HTML was done by developers. They would write, div tags and span tags and so on and so forth. So this was written by developers. Then came React. React said, developers, take a chill pill. You don't have to write all of this. You write components. You don't worry about an HTML file. You create a bunch of, components like app.jsx. And then, todo.jsx. And then maybe, user.jsx. And just render them from app.jsx. And React will do the rendering. I repeat, whenever you have a React project and you have a bunch of components, the thing that actually creates the HTML, the thing that renders is React. And where does React render? Where does React's code run? It runs inside the browser. The browser is also called the client, and hence the term client-side rendering. Client-side rendering is a modern technique. It's called modern because for years there was no React. People used to do, simple HTML, but it's a modern technique now. By modern, they mean, 2012, 2013, whenever React was released, used in web development where the rendering of a web page is performed in the browser using JavaScript. The rendering of a web page, the creation of HTML, CSS and JavaScript, or like more specifically just HTML, is performed in the browser by using JavaScript. Harkirat, I have never written code that does rendering of a web page inside the browser using JavaScript. Yes, you don't. React does. The React framework is written in a way where the React framework sort of puts things on DOM, takes things off of DOM. That is what's called rendering, which is done on the browser using JavaScript, specifically the React's code, instead of the server sending a fully rendered HTML page to the client. So what is the general workflow or steps that happen when you visit a React project? You first send a request to whatever your website is, mywebsite.com, and you get back an HTML page. This is usually an empty HTML page. It just has a script tag and a CSS link tag. Usually when you're just starting your React project, when it's small, you'll simply get back an HTML file with some, script tags pointing to another JavaScript file. So that's usually the second request. You get back HTML, there is a script tag, so you send another request to get back some JavaScript. Now this JavaScript has the React code base and also has your own logic that you might have written, which runs on the client. When this logic runs is when finally the page renders, which basically means there is actually a few milliseconds of a completely blank white page when the first request goes out and the HTML comes back, and when the second request goes out and the JavaScript comes back. The page that the user sees is a pure white page. There is no rendering. But then when the JavaScript runs is when the rendering happens and you see something on the page, which is why this is called client-side rendering. What is client-side rendering? The HTML being injected into the DOM on the client. Initially you getting back empty HTML and then you putting things in the HTML is what's called client-side rendering. Let's see that in action. Let's quickly create a simple React project. Let me call it week 19 offline 3 React TypeScript. Week 19 offline 3. Let me open this in Visual Studio Code. Let me run npm install followed by npm run build, not dev. Harkirat, why npm run dev? Why not npm run dev? Because these concepts of client side rendering and server side rendering and static side generation make more sense to understand in your final production build. Okay, by when you finally build the website and put it on an AWS machine, let's say, or on a CDN, how does it perform over there? If you run npm run dev, right, you get a bunch of optimizations. So you won't really see complete CSR or client side rendering in action, which is why, sorry, the recording died, which is why we will actually be building the project for production. We will run npm run build. This will spit out a dist folder for us. We will go to the dist folder. And if you look at it, it has a HTML file. And in the assets, it has a JavaScript file. We will go to this dist folder and run the following command, serve. If you don't see this on your machine, you can run npm install globally serve and then run the serve command. What does the serve command do? It serves this folder on an HTTP port. In my case, on localhost Corin 3000, it is serving the dist folder, which means it is serving the index.html file, the JavaScript file, so on and so forth. If I open this, you see your React project. This is how you would deploy your React project also. You would run npm run build, get the dist folder, and this folder would be deployed various places. I mean, you might deploy it on a CDN or you might deploy it on an EC2 machine. But in the end, the files are being served on a port. So we're simulating the exact same thing. The question is, does this have client-side rendering? Let's try to prove it. If I go to the network tab and refresh, what initial HTML do I get back? Empty. There is a script tag that points me to a JavaScript file. There is a link tag that points me to a CSS file. But the main HTML is empty. Harkirat, if the main HTML is empty, how do you see so many things over here? It should say Vite React over here. There is Vite plus React here. Why is this empty? Good question. The answer is, eventually this JavaScript file comes. All of this code runs. And this code is what is injecting HTML over here. That is why it's called client-side rendering. The JavaScript file is rendering the page, is updating the HTML and causing this web page to look like this. Harkirat, why do you do this? Why does React? That sounds very weird and bad. You are saying, first when the HTML comes, there is a blank page. Yes. And then the JavaScript runs and then this injects code over here. Yes, that is exactly what client-side rendering is. That is exactly why React is looked down upon. That is one of the reasons that Next.js came and introduced server-side rendering, because this is bad for a few reasons. Number one, it is not SEO optimized. We have discussed this when we discussed Next.js, but the TLDR is, whenever Google bots or Bing bots, any search engine bots hit this specific website of yours, they don't understand what your website does. They say, what HTML did I get back? Okay, Vite plus React plus TS. They understand only this much. They don't understand the meat of the logic of your page. They don't know your page is about whatever, because that eventually happens via JavaScript. And the Google bots, the search engine bots, the Bing bots, they don't really run JavaScript. They're like, bro, HTML. I mean, they do. They've of course gotten better over time. But their general thesis is just scrape HTML files and then try to understand what this page does. So that is why client-side rendering is not the best thing if you want to do SEO optimization. Secondly, it says user sees a flash before the page renders. So I said, you see like a black, I mean, it's very hard to see, but for one flash of a second, you'll see a white screen and then eventually, or a gray screen in this case. And then this eventually gets injected in the DOM. it's very hard for the naked eye to catch, but there is a problem of a flash. And thirdly, something called the waterfalling problem. Basically, means this: first you're getting an HTML file, then you're getting a JavaScript file, and then you're running some JavaScript code. Then most probably you're going to send a backend request. Okay, get me my users details. If this is a to-do application, then you'll send a request to the backend that will be like, give me all my to-dos, and then you render them here. So you're waterfalling request after request. All of these requests are happening sequentially, one after the other, which is why client-side rendering is not the best thing in the world. Then Harkirat, what is the solution? Server-side rendering. This was the foundation of our Next.js class. Okay, Next.js gives you server-side rendering. When the rendering process converting JavaScript components into HTML happens on the server, it is called server-side rendering. If you look at the workflow in a Next.js application, when you send a request to the backend, the Next.js server computes like, acha, you are Harkirat, let me get all of your to-dos. Gets the to-dos, server side renders the page, converts it into HTML on the server, and the very first index.html that you get back is populated. It already has rendering done. It already has all of your HTML, and you get a pre-rendered page on the front end. Again, this is a lot of talk. Let's see it in action. Let's create a quick Next.js project. Let me stop the React project that I was running, and let's start a Next.js project really quickly. Need to close this, open the terminal. npx create next app, copy, paste. Let me call it week 19 offline 4. Let's let it run. Let's open it in Visual Studio Code as well. This also is a framework. Next.js is a front-end framework, but it server-side renders things. If I run npm run dev over here, let me wait for, okay, this is done. So let me run npm run dev here. Dev again is, whenever you're discussing rendering, server-side rendering, client-side rendering, don't run it in dev mode. Run it in production mode. So let's run an npm run build to actually build our project. And then finally we will run npm run start once this succeeds. And open it in localhost :3000. Now let's understand the power of server-side rendering. If I open the network tab, if I refresh this page, what do we see? The very first HTML page that you get back, if you look at the response, it has a bunch of link tags, it has a bunch of script tags, it's fine. It has the real logic as well. The page was pre-rendered on the server. It was server-side rendered. The server, the thing that I'm running over here, did the heavy lifting of converting your components, in this specific case app.page.tsx, into HTML, and it sent that from the backend. The backend itself populated the page, rendering happened over here, sent it to the front end. That is what server-side rendering means. We discussed this in a lot of detail when we introduced Next.js. Why do you want to do server-side rendering? This is SEO optimized. Now, if Google hits your website, the first thing it sees is, acha, get started by editing app.page.tsx. It understands it's, whatever. This website does something. That was not true for the React project. It is true here. Gets rid of the waterfalling problem. There is a single request that's going out. This will do all the logic, extract your token, hit the database, pre-fill everything, send you back everything in a single request. You are not round tripping. You're not like, oh, first give me HTML. Oh, then give me JavaScript. Oh, then give me backend request and something else. Single request, everything happens. You get back the pre-populated response. No white flash before you see content. The first thing that you see, the first HTML that comes back is populated. This isn't empty HTML that you get back and eventually populated. First HTML itself is populated. Downsides of SSR. Expensive, since every request needs to render. The reason people say my Vercel bill was very big is because Vercel, charges a lot, but also because Next.js is very expensive. What was happening in React? In React, if there are 100 people on the website, let's say these 100 people's browsers, there was rendering logic running on all of these machines. There was rendering logic running here. You had your rendering logic running on hundreds of machines. When you move to Next.js, all of these users tell the server, please render. And then the server does the very expensive rendering operation. So that is why it's expensive to do, because you have a server that's now computing this for all the clients, versus in React, all of this rendering was happening on the client, and rendering is sort of an expensive process of, figuring out what to put on the DOM, creating the HTML. It's an expensive operation. So that is one reason why, Next.js is not the best thing, or SSR is not the best thing. We'll understand how we can fix this in the next slide. Harder to scale because you can't cache it via CDNs. If you have gone through the front-end deployment video, you might have seen how you can distribute front-ends via CDNs. You can't do that for Next.js. Those are the downsides. Let's understand how can you get server-side rendering also, but make it less expensive. I repeat, how can you render the page on the server, do this expensive operation I was talking about of rendering, but it'll not be expensive. So do this operation, make it server-side rendered, but somehow make it less expensive. Somehow run this rendering logic only once. Let's see how you can do that. This is also very weird in Next.js. Before Next 13, or before the app router, there was something called the pages router. I don't know how many of you have heard of it. The thing that we're using right now in Next.js is this app router. But before app router, there was something called the pages router. Static site generation was sort of easy over there. It's very weird now. I don't know what Next.js is doing, or what Vercel is doing, but this is how it's done now. This is how we will learn it. Refer to this talk, even though, it'll boggle your mind as to how they do this. Okay. Static site generation. If a page uses static site generation, the page's HTML is generated at build time. The page's HTML is generated at build time. Basically means, you have a very expensive page. Let's say, your landing page. And right now, if you're using Next.js, as many people ask for the landing page, the rendering happens on the server for all of these pages. For all of these pages, on the server, we render a few things. This is very expensive. What if I could do this rendering only once? I could somehow on the server create a, landing page.html file. And now anytime someone asks me for the landing page, I don't render it again. I don't convert components into HTML again. I just return them this statically generated file. What does static site generation mean? It means you statically generated, which means, what's the difference between static and dynamic? Dynamic means every user wants its own page. Static means you created it once, everyone is going to fetch the same page. That is what static site generation means. If you know a certain page is going to be the same for everyone, it will look the exact same for everyone, why not render it once during build time? What is build time? When you run npm run build. When you're running npm run build, this process, when this is running, why not pre-generate this page and then send everyone this page only? Why do you want to keep regenerating landing.html when you know it's going to be the same for everyone? This is not true if everyone has their own landing page. But if everyone is going to see the same thing, for example, if you go to projects.100xdev.com, this page is statically generated because everyone is going to see the same tracks, right? Harkirat, the app bar will be different. Yes, the app bar isn't statically generated. Excuse me. But this component, everything that you see over here is the same for everyone, which is why we statically generate this page. When will it change? If you see individual progress over here, if every user sees their own progress over here, then, static site generation will become difficult, because you will have to create, a single landing page won't be enough. Every user will have their own progress. You can still do SSG over there, but let's not go there. But if the page is going to look the same for everyone, just generate it once on build time. And then whenever someone asks for that page, right now, if anyone goes here, the server doesn't render again. Server has an HTML file, server returns it to the user. We'll see this very soon as well. Okay, where this HTML file is and how it is served. Given that context about SSG, let's understand how can you do static site generation. Let's say you have, very similar to how on projects or 100xsteps.com, you see a lot of, tracks. Let's say we have to create a to-do website where you see a bunch of to-dos. Assume everyone has the same set of to-dos. You don't have different set of to-dos for different people. Assume it's the same, very similar to, everyone who comes to this website sees the same set of tracks. Given you have this backend endpoint that is going to return you the to-dos, create a statically generated page and put it in Next.js. Harkirat, how do I create a statically generated page? We'll see very soon. How would you write this logic if I did not say create a statically generated page? Harkirat, I would do this. I would copy this and then, I would go to Visual Studio Code. I would delete all the code from here, create an empty, div. And then since we are using Next.js 13 and it has asynchronous components, I would do this, Harkirat. Const response equal to await, fetch this thing, and then const data equal to await response.json. And then, I would do something like this, Harkirat. Data.todos, because, that is what you get back from the server. You get back an object which has a to-dos key, which is an array of, all the to-dos. So I would do a data.todos.map, to-do div /div, and then here I will type to-do.title, and then maybe, to-do.description. Harkirat, this is how I would do. You can give a better type over here, doesn't matter. This is how you would create, very simple dumb page. Harkirat, why this? I will do this. Use effect. This is how we did it in React. Yes, this is how you did it in React, but you don't want to do this in Next.js. Why, Harkirat? Why can I not create, const to-dos, set to-dos equal to use state? Harkirat, why can I not do this? This is how we did it in React. Let's do it the same way in Next.js. If you are doing this, you are doing client-side rendering. Even though Next.js provides you server-side rendering, you are not using any benefits of it. You are saying, this component, whenever it goes to the client, on the client run this logic. And then on the client, set the to-dos. And then on the client, the rendering will happen again. It will be client-side rendering. We don't want that. We want, at the very least, server-side rendering. But what we actually want is static site generation. So at the very least, you should write this code. Okay, Harkirat. Let's see if this works. Let me run npm run dev. And let's see if we see a list of to-dos. Harkirat, I see a list of to-dos. Notice one thing. If I refresh this page, the backend endpoint changes the list of to-dos. I repeat, the list of to-dos actually changes. The backend is written in a way, you get random set of to-dos. So ideally, when I'm going to this page, shouldn't these change as well? Why are they not changing? I repeat, this fetch request that goes out, it'll give you a different response every time. If you look at it, if I refresh this page, the length of this is changing. But I don't see the same thing here on Next.js. If I stop the server and restart it, then I will see it. Now I will see, still don't see it. Now I see a different page. What is happening over here? Why is it even though the backend endpoint returns a different response every time, the frontend isn't doing it? The answer is because this page is statically generated. Harkirat, how? Where did you write? You never wrote, use static page. And if you've done Next.js in the past, then get server side props. This is how you would use, how you would do static site generation in Next.js like until last year. Harkeet, you didn't do any of this. Still this page is statically generated. Yes. By default, if you have a component where you're doing anything, if you're doing a fetch followed by, rendering, or if you weren't even doing a fetch, if this was a completely static page, it will be statically generated. Harkirat, how do you know? I can prove it to you. If I put a log over here, console.log, data found from the backend server is console.log json.stringify data. If I run npm run build over here, notice what happens during the build. It says compilation error. Let's give it a key equal to todo.id. Try that one more time. Notice this log over here. What happened during build time? This code ran. This code ran during build time. No one has visited the website right now. I haven't even run npm run start. Still, this code ran. What does it tell you? The page is being statically generated. What was the definition of statically generated files? If a page uses static site generation, the page's HTML is generated at build time. And as you can see, when it was building, these lines ran. So most probably an HTML file was created with, whatever this renders. And that HTML file will be served to everyone. Another way to prove this is, now if I run npm run start, not dev, start. I've already built it. Now let me run npm run start. And you will notice, if I go here, there is no log. This log does not run. What does that tell you? Doesn't matter how many times I refresh this page, this log does not come. That tells you that we are not re-rendering anything. The site has been statically generated. That statically generated file is being served again and again. Harkirat, where is that statically generated file? You can find it in somewhere here, I'm sure. .next server app cat index.html. And if you look at this file, most probably, there you go. There is to do 5. This is what you see here. So this HTML file has been generated once. It's not just true for, the root page. I can create another page called to-dos. So to-dos followed by page.tsx. And if I copy the code here and, rebuild the project, if I run npm run start, even on the /to-dos page, I will see the same to-do. Would have been nice if it was a different one. Let me rebuild. rm-r.next, npm run build again. Look at the logs. As you can see, data from the server, all the logs came. If I run npm run start and go to /to-dos, I see 2 to-dos over here. If I go to .next /server/app/to-dos, I will see to-dos.html over here in app itself. So if I do a cat to-dos.html, you will see there is to-do2, which is what you see over here. So this is also statically generated, and now doesn't matter how many people hit this, everyone will get back this HTML. You don't have to re-render it again. So are we doing server-side rendering now? No, we're doing static site generation. Question you might have is, my battery is very low, but I think we'll be able to finish this. Question you might have is, how can you clear the cache? Harkirat, what if this server has some sensitive data that, you need cleared every few seconds? The answer is, you can, pass it a bunch of options. For example, if you pass it the option of next revalidate every 10 seconds. Then every 10 seconds, this request will, not every 10 seconds this request will go, but if there is a difference of 10 seconds between two requests, the second request will refetch the response. You can invalidate the cache by doing this. So if I go back here and run npm run build, the page will be statically generated once, but it will be updated as more people send requests, and if there is a gap of more than 10 seconds between those requests. If I run npm run start, you will see the first time I visit it, it's fine. I get back that response, whatever response I was supposed to. If I keep refreshing it after 10 seconds, oh, sorry, this I added to the /todos page. So let me go to /todos, and now let me refresh this. As you can see, the data got refreshed. Now everyone who is getting this data. But if 10 seconds pass, then the data will get refreshed again. Data got refreshed again. So that is how you can keep invalidating cache as time goes by. If you know, this might change from time to time. For example, we know on app.100xsteps.com, on projects.100xsteps.com, we add tracks from time to time. And right now what happens is, as we add more and more tracks, I personally go into the server. Go into the server and restart the server. If you look at my WhatsApp history, it's filled with messages ke bhaiya redeploy, because we had static site generation and I did not use this. Don't ask me why I did not use this, but yeah, we did not use this. So if you go to daily code, and if I would restart, I would rebuild the project and then restart the process anytime a new track was added to projects.100xsteps.com, because now we have like DSA tracks that are added by another instructor, right? So a great pull request to make right now would be if you go to the daily code base and then try to figure out how you can fix it here. I'm not going to share any details, but that might be one thing to figure out. How can you invalidate the cache here every 2 minutes, let's say, so that if a new track is added, it eventually shows up here after 2 minutes. Given you already know, you can pass in some next configurations whenever you're sending fetch requests. One more thing you can do is, if you want to, invalidate cache, you can tag every request. So for example, I can do something like this. This request that's going out. Is tagged with to-dos, and then whenever you call revalidate tags, let me create a next action really quickly, even though I think we have enough battery. Lib folder location doesn't matter, actions, and let's call it action1.ts. It's called revalidate. If I call revalidate over here itself, then anytime a request comes, it will revalidate any place that has the to-dos tag, which this guy does, which means it will refresh the to-dos. So now if I run the code, on every refresh I will see new to-dos, because on every refresh control will reach here and this will call this server action that will revalidate all the tags. Kirat, why do you have to run this on the server? It's obvious, right? You want to run this on the server because the server is where the statically generated file is. So if you want to, revalidate it, recreate it, the server is where you need to run that logic. If I try this now, if I run npm run build, we did add it in the to-dos page, followed by npm run start. If I go to localhost 3000, as I refresh the page, nothing happens. Oh, I'm on the wrong page. Let me go to /todos, refresh. As you can see, as I refresh, the list of to-dos is changing, because every time I'm refreshing, I'm also revalidating the cache. Now it depends on you. A lot of times you might have statically generated assets or things that don't refresh very often. The most common use case of SSG is blogging websites. If you have a blog, you are rarely writing a new blog, right? Once every few months, or even this website is a great example of where you should use static site generation because this page will mostly be constant. You can add like a cache invalidator every an hour or so. But other than that, this page doesn't change very quickly. So it doesn't make sense to server-side render this for everyone. Makes sense to just statically generate it and just return it to the user. That is what static site generation is. If you want an exercise, I already gave you one. Okay, can you figure out how to re-invalidate cache here? But here is another assignment, slightly harder. And for this, you'll have to go through the docs over here. It's not too difficult. Just go to the section on get server. Oh, it's not that. Oh, it's probably not here. I'll tell you what the problem statement is. I know how to do it in like Next.js before Next.js 13 version. There's probably a way to do it in Next 13 as well, or in the more specifically the app router as well. But even I don't know what the answer there is or how to do it. I'm sure there's a way to do it, but I've never done it. The question is, okay, how can you statically generate dynamic routes? As you can see, these routes are dynamic. It has, there is no standard place. There is no page.tsx file where, I can run this logic and it will be the same for every page. Whatever is the handler of this /tracks/some ID /other ID, there's a single handler there. How can I statically generate all of these 11 pages? And for another track also. For every track, how can I statically generate every page? Harkirat, why do you want to do that? Because, if I statically generate everything, then, these nexts will be very fast. Right now, there is a small, gap that happens, even though it's very unnoticeable because of a few reasons. But there's still a backend request that goes out and some rendering that happens and then you finally see this. What if I could server side render everything? My whole website could be server side rendered. Think about it. There's not a lot of point of doing server side rendering here because eventually we will have MCQs over here, which will be different for different people. But think about it. You should know how to do it. The way to do that before the app router and the pages router was get server side paths. So read about get server side not props, paths. Get server side paths. I think it was this or something else. I don't know. Paths. I think these are more latest docs. Let's see. Server side. Maybe not. Pretty sure it was get server side paths or something like that. But you get the problem statement. The problem statement is how can you statically generate dynamic routes? You can statically generate a constant route. The / route is constant. Very easy to statically generate it. But how can you statically generate dynamic routes? That's the exercise I will leave it at. As I said here, I don't know the answer. I'm sure I can figure it out by Googling. I know the answer, I think, in the old version or like in the pages router. I don't know the answer in, the app router. But if you know it, let me know in the comments. There is a comment section. We don't use it too much. With that, let's end it. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.